right, folks, welcome back to BEG Wrestling. We are here with none other than Skylar Grote.
Yep.
Skylar, welcome to the show. How are you feeling? We're out here at the Olympic training here in Lancaster. Mm-hmm. How are you feeling out here? Who are you training with?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super grateful for the opportunity to be here training with our best and help them get ready for the Olympics later this summer. So, yeah, I mean, I get to wrestle with Kennedy Blades, who's the representative at 76 kilos this week, and a lot of other tough girls around my weight. So it's just a great opportunity, and Lancaster has been pretty cool. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I watched you at the trials. I guess you lost to Kennedy, but you're here training with her.
Yeah.
Big rivalry there. You guys friends?
She's a bit younger than me, so I don't know her that well. But I mean, in wrestling, I don't really have these rivalries, I would really say. I mean, when I go out there and compete, I'm obviously in the mindset to win, but I don't really hold grudges or anything, and I'm able to let it go at the end of the match. So for those 6 minutes, like, I'm definitely coming at you, but other than that, you know, I'm pretty much friends with everybody. So
off the mat, you're a little nicer than you are on the mat,
yes,
is what
yes.
you're saying.
People say I look very mean on the mat, and I guess that's just kind of my style of wrestling, but I like to be friends with everyone off the mat. So
yeah, well, I follow you on social media. I think you're great. I think you're great for promoting the sport and women's wrestling especially. One question I want to ask you, I'd like to hear kind of your story about how you got into wrestling in the first place, because there may be some young women out there who are on the fence and they hear your story and you might sway them to get into wrestling themselves.
yeah, so I first saw the sport. My dad and his friend were wrestling in my living room, actually, and my mom, of course, was yelling at them not to knock over any furniture and stuff, but they didn't care. And I was around 5 years old, and I remember watching them. They just looked like they were having so much fun, and I told my dad, like, I want to do that. Like, I want to wrestle. And I was really young at the time, about 5, so they waited a couple years, and when I was 8, they came to me again, and they said, you know, do you still want to wrestle? And I was like, no, I don't want to wrestle. And they're like, well, we're going to sign you up, and if you don't like it after a year, you can quit. And so I've been wrestling ever since then. There definitely have been times where I've wanted to quit. I think that we don't talk about that enough. There was definitely points in my life where I didn't want to do it anymore, but it was less about not liking the sport and more about, like, the lack of opportunity for women, because it just felt like it was so hard for me to keep, like, doing what I loved. So but yeah, that's a little bit about how I got into the sport. My dad wrestled for Cornell in college, and he was an alternate for the Olympics in '76. So yeah, we have some wrestling in the family.
Well, that's interesting, and you mentioned how difficult wrestling can be. So, I mean, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you, what has been, like, the most difficult thing? And you mentioned, like, maybe a lack of opportunity for women, or maybe what has been the most challenging thing in wrestling for you?
Yeah, I think growing up, I only had boys to wrestle with, and so that was definitely a hard thing, because women's wrestling wasn't as popular. And so, you know, I'd go into a club or, you know, just a wrestling practice, and all the boys just, like, didn't want to wrestle me. And so that was really hard for me. I felt kind of like an outcast in the sport of wrestling. And then another hard point in my career was deciding where to go to college, because I went to Blair Academy for high school, and it's, you know, really great academically, and I wanted to go to a really good school for college as well. All my friends were going to great universities, and in order for me to wrestle and go to school, my options were super limited. And that was a really hard point in my life, because I was just like, do I put my academics first, or do I pursue this goal to, you know, be an Olympic champion one day? And I actually did a year at Lafayette in Easton, Pennsylvania, but I realized, you know, if I want to do well in the sport of wrestling, I need partners, I need, you know, good coaches. And so nothing in the States really appealed to me, because all the women's wrestling schools were in small towns, and I just wanted a bigger college experience. And so my dad's friend suggested that we go look in Canada at school. And I came across Brock University, and they had a great business program, a separate school for the business program, and that's what I wanted to do. So I enrolled in their business program there, and I wrestled on an all-girls team, and I was coached under Marty Calder, who went to the Olympics twice, I believe, and Tanya Verbeek, who is a 3-time Olympic medalist. So it was just amazing to get that experience. And, my teammates were world and Olympic athletes. So it was just the best environment for me at the time. So that was kind of like another issue. And then I guess the biggest problem that I've had in the sport of wrestling was the weight cutting for me. That was a big thing. I used to cut down to 68 kilos, and now I've gotten, even bigger than when I used to obviously cut down to 68. I used to sit at like 73 and always cut down to 68, but it was hard for me to sit at 73 too. So I guess my body always wanted to get bigger, and I was always meant to get bigger, but I was just constantly starving my body, and so it never was able to reach its, genetic potential, I guess. But I think as a woman growing up in the sport, and just a woman in general, you're encouraged to be smaller and smaller. And
sure.
So in society, that was kind of being like reinforced into my brain. And then I would go to wrestling practice, and it would also be reinforced into my brain, like smaller's better. And so that was really hard to undo that mindset of, thinner's better, losing weight's better for wrestling and just you in general. And so I really had to rework my mindset to not think that way. And it took a long time.
That is fascinating. And I mean, very interesting to me. You bring up some interesting points and kind of the public persona, public perception, I guess, maybe. But it also makes me think about, just the whole general mentality. So you walk on the mat, you have to be the ultimate competitor, and you walk off the mat, and as a woman, it's not general. For you to translate that and then be that same person off the mat, I'm not sure that would be publicly, accepted. How do you kind of mentally transition from the competitor on the mat and then obviously a very easy and nice person to talk to off the mat?
Yeah, I think, it kind of in life you have to wear many different hats, right? And so that's kind of something I've had to learn. I have to channel a certain person that I am in a certain moment. And, I try to be nice and kind in all aspects of my life. But like we were talking about before, like when you go out on that mat, you have to channel like this inner like fighter in you and maybe not be so much of that nice person. And I think I've learned that to be able to channel the different parts of me at different times in my life where, like in the last year, I kind of have in my training been like, Skylar, you need to be tougher. Like you have to have certain days in practice where you're like, I can't get taken down, or, I need to be tough, because your brain, like that's how your brain learns. So if you're going out to competition and that's the first time you're like, yeah, I got to be super defensive because I'm winning with a minute left and like this person can't get on my legs, like your brain's not used to that scenario. And so you have to replicate that in practice. So I think that being able to channel that like fighter in you, maybe in that 1 minute go, or, in practice, I just think it's really important because, based off of our brains, like that's how we learn.
Yeah.
So.
Do you listen to any kind of like pump up music? What kind of music? Do you listen to music before you go out on the mat?
Yeah, I like rap and pop, and I listen to pump up music before I go out there. I know some people like to be calm and stuff before they go out there, but that's just not me. And I
not
don't
you.
think No, I'm like, I need to be ready to go. Like I barely sleep the night before because I'm just amped up, ready to go. So that's kind of how I've always been. I like barely sleep, and at this point in my career, I just accept it. I think it used to bother me before, and I used to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't really sleep last night. That means I'm not going to compete well. But now I'm just like, nope, I'm ready. Like I didn't really sleep. Yeah. I'm ready to go.
Once that adrenaline gets going, you're all right. But okay, I appreciate you talking about the physical challenges of the sport. We've also kind of touched on the mental. I want to know something about Skylar Grote, totally unwrestling related. Tell us something about you. Maybe a hobby? What do you do for fun outside of wrestling?
Oh gosh, outside of wrestling. Huh. I mean, wrestling does consume a lot of my life, but I mean, I also love to read. I have like this fascination with the brain and learning about the brain. And I guess that's kind of because of wrestling and all the struggles I had with weight cutting and stuff. But I've gotten really big into just psychology in general and human behavior and learning about the brain and how to rewire the brain and learning about like neural pathways and stuff. And all of that is like super fascinating to me. Fun fact about me, I'm one of 7 kids. I'm
Wow.
the youngest of 7.
No wonder you're a competitor.
Well, my mom had 3 kids from a previous marriage, and my dad had 2, and then they got married and had my sister and I. So we're a big blended family. But yeah, I come from a family, and this was what I was going to say, is I come from a family of all doctors, and I was never, so my dad's a doctor, my sister just graduated med school, my other sister's a doctor, her husband's a doctor, my uncle's a doctor, and my aunt's a doctor, and my mom's a nurse. So
That is unbelievable. That is
yeah, so I
incredible.
come from a very medical background, and I went to school for business because I wasn't interested in that stuff. But now, as I've gotten older, I am so interested in the brain and stuff, and
Psychology and
and
all
I
that.
love it, and I love learning about that kind of stuff. And yeah, I like would go back to school to be a doctor, but I want to wrestle for the next 4 years, and I don't really want to be $500K in debt, but definitely into that stuff now. So definitely read a lot about the brain, and I just love learning about how I can transform my life simply by, creating new neural pathways and changing my perspective. And a lot of research is being done now that if you're changing the way you think and changing those neural pathways, it also has an effect on your physiological body as well. And the mind-body connection is just something I've really dove into.
Skylar, if I knew you were into psychology like that, we could have had a whole different conversation. I am all into that myself, but it makes me think. And one thing I want to kind of go back to, you mentioned the weight cutting being a challenge for women.
Yeah.
Is that something that you think deters women from wrestling?
I think that weight cutting is something that kind of deters, anyone, especially parents. I think that there's a big shift for health, and I think that's a great shift, but I think it's, deterring parents. Do I really want to put my child through something that's unhealthy, like the cutting weight and all of that? But I would like to challenge that and say, you can still wrestle and be healthy, right? It's not like you have to cut weight and you have to do all of that. And I think for a long time, at least in my career, I had this mindset of this is just part of it. You have to cut weight. You have to, make extreme sacrifices. But I live a really balanced life right now. And, I can go on vacation right now for a week and not worry about gaining 10 pounds on vacation because I am at a weight that is right for my body. And I think that we just kind of have to keep pushing that mindset and those habits. And I think that will help the longevity of our sport because, people will see that there's a healthy way to do this.
Yeah, and it has to make it more enjoyable and more sustainable, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I'll say this: my dad coached my brother growing up, and even myself briefly, but never was about the weight cutting. It was always be your full strength and at a healthy weight, and it has to make it more enjoyable. But
yeah, no, definitely. And I think we don't know, and we're learning so much from a medical perspective of there's just things that people don't understand with cutting weight. So for example, if you're restricting your calories and restricting your food, you're constantly thinking about food 24/7 because that's your physical body's way of trying to get you to find food. And so I think we think it's this mental battle of you just have no willpower, but that's not it. I remember being 68 kilos, and when I was cutting, all I could think about 24/7 was food. And now that I'm 10 pounds more, I only think about food when I need to eat.
well, it's the body's natural defense mechanisms kicking in.
Yes, it's going to make you think about the thing that you need. So if you go days without drinking water, what's going to be the one thing on your mind? It's going to be where's water? How do I get to water? And that's the physical body's way of communicating with the brain and saying, hey, you need this go get it. And I think a lot of people just don't know that, and they don't know the science behind those kind of things. And if someone told me, Skylar, you would have to weigh, 5 to 10 pounds more, but you won't think about food 24/7. You can go on vacation and not gain 10 pounds in a week. If I just knew that previously, then I think my wrestling career would have been a lot smoother.
Yeah, well, I could not agree more. And to me, if some stuff you just say it out loud, if it doesn't sound right, it probably isn't. Should you have kids losing weight as they're growing and maturing? That doesn't sound right to me on the surface. But as they're growing, you know what I mean? Like,
no, definitely.
Maybe as an adult, wow, Skylar, have you thought about what you're going to do after wrestling at all?
Yeah, I have a business degree. I went to undergrad at Brock, and I got a degree in entrepreneurship. And then I went to Oregon State and wrestled for the RTC, and I got
the Beavers?
Yep. And I got my master's in marketing. So I just graduated in December from that. So I definitely could go the business. Thank you. I definitely could go the business route, which I think I will do. But I also want to coach women's wrestling on the D1 level as well.
Okay.
So I think I'll do a little bit of both, because I like to be stimulated in multiple ways. I can't just wrestle, and I can't just do school. My whole life I've been wrestling and doing school at the same time. And so I think that I can, be a coach and at the same time, have a little side business or something. So
yeah, well,
I'm just hoping these D1 programs start to get women's wrestling
exploding. That's what I'm here trying to do. So yeah, we're trying to get women's wrestling going. I appreciate you coming in here and talking about a lot of the things that you did. I would love to have you on again in the future.
Yes.
I have so many different thoughts going through my. As soon as you brought up psychology, it was kind of game over. But any final thoughts? You're here training. Just anything. Any final,
No, thank you for having me, and thank you guys for listening. I'm just, grateful for everything that I've learned in my wrestling career, and I hope that from my experience, people listening can learn something. So.
Yeah, I think they will.
Hopefully.
In fact, I know they will. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you
Appreciate
for having
it.
me.
Please come on again.
Okay,
All right.
Yes, I will.